Scott and Laura Simpson, and we're at Glennon. We've got about 4,200 acres and predominantly breeding Angus and ultra black cattle, and yeah, a little bit of summer cropping thrown in with as well. So with our cattle, we measure our profitability basically on kilograms and how much we produce. At the moment we weigh our cattle regularly, our young stock, and it's just a normal system that I would say is traditional. We use Herdmaster to record all our cattle details. Every animal has an animal tag and also a RFID that we use to scan into the program and record. So our main technology that we are using is just Gallagher reader, and that scans in, and then Gallagher scales, and that hooks up to our laptop that goes beside the crush, and all runs Herdmaster and their crush slide recorder.
We normally do a mob at a time, so we run several different mobs, and of 400 to 450 females that we might have here at one time. They're usually mobs of 80, and a mob of 80 is pretty much a day. Once we've got them marked and tagged and castrated and then matched and returned to the paddock, that's a full day's work for both of us and one other labour unit as well. We usually get somebody in to help us over that period of time.
Our major limitation here is time. Where we have a young family, we have a reasonable size farm, and we're very time poor. Labour is expensive, hard to find, and also unreliable as such for what you get out of it. So we rely on technology to sort of help us out, and so we're more efficient, but I would say time is our biggest. Everything needs to be smooth and efficient. And then on top of that, cost would be the next one. There's sometimes, as soon as it gets dry like this, the money's flying out the door. If they could talk, or there was some form of programming that could bring it all together, where we just type in that tag number and we can see where it's been, what producer, what feedlot, it's eventually to where it ended up. Did it end up in Coles or Woolworths or in a boutique butcher, or and how did it perform? So as us choosing genetics, we need that information, because ultimately we're at the beginning, we start off. So
we can make better decisions about the sort of bulls we select, and we can make decisions a lot easier about EBVs and estimated breed values and different traits that we need to pick up on, or the sort of females that we need to be retaining and getting more out of.
Something that helps us match our cows and calves to each other, because that will often take a week out of our schedule, and it's not always accurate. So that information is proving to be really helpful to us. We realised that we could build a product and we could grow it, finish it, and at the end of the day we would put it through the sale yard or on Auctions Plus and sell it that way, but there was no marketing involved in our cattle. We're putting all this effort into making sure that they've got the right nutrients, that their fertility is high, that they are a good product, that they're going to go forward, and we wanted to differentiate between someone else's cattle and us. We yard wean, we put a lot of effort into making sure our cattle have a good temperament and easy to handle, as well as they will grow. And we wanted to market that a little bit more, so in the hope that someone will put that extra bid on, because that we have put that extra time into that. So I guess the easiest way we thought of getting that information out publicly and controlled was to use Instagram, Facebook, and to build a website. The ag community online is building, and that's where we come across training days or information from the LLS, and same thing. I think it's good just for people to see
Yeah.
what is farming.
I'm Richard Doherty and I've been farming on Balala for 7 years now. We moved across from South Africa in 2011. We have 3,000 acres here, and originally Balala Station was one of the founding runs within the New England and was close on 100,000 acres in its day. I've done EIDs for the last, since we started, on all the new ewes that have been born. But the issues that I've been having with that, the productivity and the measuring of it is, there's in hearing about, you need to measure to manage, but which is all well and good. But if you're just measuring and it's taking time and you're not doing anything or using any of that information, it becomes a pointless exercise. So the system that I'm using to measure, it's manual. I use a electronic identification wand, and I use walkover weighing in a crate. So I measure on an indicator, which is then identified with the individual animal. So this year I really am trying to focus and work out which are my better performing ewes and which aren't. So I use a lot of the Australian sheep breeding values in selecting rams, and it's, I've done the DNA testing and flock profiling to see where I am within my flock. But the actual particular measurements that I want to do, that I feel from an indexing to see what is a better performing ewe and what is not, is I'm going to be doing the wool and all the testing that goes with that, the micron and the rest of it. But I also feel that somewhere it's the weight of the animal and its growth rate has something to do with its doing ability. The limitations that in doing it are, one, just manpower and doing it, and getting off one's proverbial and doing it. The other is that you've still got to work around. You've also then got to weigh up what your cost outlays are as to whether you're going to get the cost benefit coming back from that. From a commercial perspective, to be tied in and linked, I think you have to really work out what those costs are. To have remote satellite stations around the property to see what's happening. And that outlay is something for me, could be hugely onerous. And to figure out what the benefit is, I would question trying to understand the utilization of paddocks and utilization of areas and grazing. That's exciting, that's very exciting. Because it certainly allows you to figure out through the animal that there's something lacking in a part of the paddock that GPS has never been to, and to try and figure out why that is the case, whether it's whether there's a nutrient deficiency or there's something happening in the soils or something. It really does highlight those things. And that is, I think, what I get excited about when I read about new innovation and technology in this space that we're working in.
David Worsley, 40 kilometres north of Inverell, running 7,500 acres. sheep and cattle production, self-replacing merino flock, self-replacing Angus flock, and I also do some crossbred lambs. It's all grazing, no cropping. I also work for Australian Wool Innovation. I'm contracted to Australian Wool Innovation as the wild dog facilitator for North East New South Wales. I mean, measuring productivity is always a challenge. It's a huge challenge just from a time perspective and a labour perspective and how we can actually do it on the ground. I mean, I'm running 7,500 acres, I have a full-time job, I have one full-time employee, so everything's got to be really simple, really basic, and it's got to work without any flaws and without any great setups or anything. It's got to be simple and effective. Everything we use now is fairly manual, fairly simple. I'm probably like most farmers, I'm older generation, technology doesn't come easy, so things are fairly simplistic. We use scales to do a lot of weighing of animals and measuring and performance in that respect and weight gains and so forth, but it's all manual, all through the yards, over the scales, and because I'm away so often it does become quite difficult. So I've just sold lambs yesterday, 550 lambs went as a job lot. They're all pretty much in the specs, but I've got some that are too heavy, but they'll still come back on good dollars, but ideally they would have been done weighed more often. But from a labour perspective, simplicity of operation, it's time to go, they go. Well, I guess our key drivers for our productivity are going to be the amount of pasture we can grow and the quality of that pasture, and then the weight gains that we actually get off it, or the wool production we get off it, depending on whether we're looking at sheep, cattle or fat lambs, and the reproductive efficiency. They're really our key drivers. They're not necessarily easy to measure. We preg test our cows so we know exactly what our percentages are. I used to scan my ewes, but I don't have as many anymore, so I don't scan, but we always used to work on fetuses as opposed to lambing percentage, but then look at what we started with. So we started with 135% fetuses, then what was our actual lambing percentage and where our losses were. But that's all very manual stuff. There's no real technology in that, and I don't know how you incorporate the technology into it, really. Probably understanding technology, again, just being older generation and all the people I deal with through my wild dog role, really, probably a slight generalisation, but most of us are older and we do struggle with technology and the uptake of it, so that's always a challenge for us. I guess just having simple applications, things like being able to weigh the animals, while scanning the ear tags and put that together so you've got that individual animal data. Having that sort of, I guess, probably Bluetoothing directly to your computer, not having to muck around too much with it, and just very, very simple systems that really work and are quite bomb-proof. It doesn't need to be that elaborate. I don't want to collect data for the sake of data. I used to do a lot of wool clip analysis and stuff in the old days, and you collect a lot of data, but what you actually do with that data becomes important. So I think we've got to stay with simple data that's actually going to help us to make meaningful decisions. But some of the main issues with wild dogs are the size of their territories. So you can't deal with it on an individual farm perspective, and farmers tend to, they own this much and that's where their focus is inside the box, whereas this problem is bigger. And it's really hard to get people to work together, to communicate together, and to do that effectively so we get the solutions. And with that too also is the time demands. I mean, baiting is an effective technique, but when we bait, we don't know really how many we get. We can measure predation or some degree of predation and get an idea of how effective we are, but we don't know how many dogs. Whereas if we use traps and we hang a trap in a tree, we can say we've got X number of dogs, and that is not necessarily the most meaningful result, but it's what people really hang their hats on. So it'd be really good to have better indicators of the presence and absence of dogs in the environment. How we do that, I mean, obviously we use cameras now, but then the amount of time that we spend going through looking at SD cards, going through a whole heap of photos that are probably not relevant, it makes it very, very hard and time consuming, and just keeping that on an ongoing basis is a real challenge. Yeah, anything along those lines, of whether it's right to the degree of facial recognition or even the recognition of animals as opposed to non-animals, and some simplifying of the whole system, the more I guess that you can automate that going through SD cards and looking at things, the better off we'll be. And the example where I've just pulled 20 cameras, the SD cards out of 20 cameras that have been up since January, taking a photo every 5 minutes. Plus that's some statics, plus every time they're motion activated as well. And the number of images that are there and the time it's going to take to go through and actually pull out what's probably not a large number of meaningful images is going to be really, really difficult. So when we're actually wild dog trapping, legally we have to check traps every 24 hours. That's a legal requirement in New South Wales, and really from an animal ethics point of view, it's essential to longevity of the use of them and the way that the community sees it, and for the animals we have to do that. It's very, very time consuming to drive a 20, 30, maybe even 40 kilometre line every day to look at dogs, to look at traps just to see if anything's there. And if you go to Western New South Wales, those lines could be 160, 180 kilometres a day. So one of the things that we could really, really do with is some sort of an automated system of acknowledgement could be as simplistic as whether a trap's been set off or not. I mean, ideally what's actually in it, but some form of, I guess, remote communication to say that something has happened with a trap, which obviously is going to be outside of telephone range. It has to be some form of communication that works and is absolutely bulletproof and guaranteed to work. I think the use of technology in the future is probably going to be through the phone, because everyone has a phone now that really is a quite high-tech computer. People just need to probably carry them, use them more. They need to work offline, and we do have certain ones like the Feral Scan app, which we use for wild dog recording stuff and group work, which works offline and is brilliant, but we need more of those things that will work in that offline situation so that they will work everywhere and farmers will actually use them, carry a phone, make it actually worthwhile to actually do that.
Matthew Monk, General Manager of the Beef Operation, Sundown Pastoral Company. Sundown Pastoral Company's an aggregation of both cropping and beef cattle operations. It's predominantly on this side in New England, and it comprises of Sundown Valley, which is 45,000 acres. We have a feedlot at Gunee, which is 4,000 acres in a 10,000 head capacity. We've recently sold two farms, Paradise and Newstead, to Paraway, and we still manage those farms for a transition period. The cropping operation's based at Moree, and it's basically a 25,000 acres of irrigation, predominantly cotton, and there's about 40,000 acres of dry land. And there's some of the dry land's used for cattle operation. There's about 10,000 acres that's used for cattle at Moree. So as a group, the farms, with all the farms included, have a capacity of running about 60,000 head, or turning over 60 to 80,000 a year. We've basically back-to-back grounding Wagyus for AACO, which is a very simple form, and they're usually on farm for 200 to 300 days. So focus is, obviously the owners were manufacturers, came from manufacturing industries and the shed business. So they have very much a factory mentality. And they're outside the industry. They're agriculturalists now, but they weren't. So they came in and structured their businesses as a factory rather than a lifestyle. So it's an interesting concept, and they've always been very, very strong on technology. The key in our cattle operations is a computer-based system for our recording, performance recording of cattle, invoicing of cattle performance, because we get paid kilos of beef produced, so we need a system in place that firstly measures that, secondly records it, and thirdly invoices it out. All the systems are linked together. They go back to Brisbane to the server. All systems do that. So we don't have backups with USBs or any manual backups, and that takes away the risk of losing data. That heavily relies on connectivity. It's been a network of different ways we've implemented ourselves with help from other industry people. We were probably the first to use high gain aerials and probably 6 or 7 years ago. The software we use was developed by two people that came out of the hospitality industry, and they actually did the accommodation to the Olympic Games, and also they developed the touchscreen for the restaurant trade. And by chance, one of the partners had a cattle operation, and he thought he could apply it to the cattle operation, as he successfully did. And you find you get a lot different focus on collecting data and running a business. Technology, there's so much technology out there we can use. but the limitations are the connectivity, and hopefully in time we'll solve that, and we are solving that internally. There's some great technologies like drone technology that's out there. Unfortunately, because of our scale, it's just not big enough. And to get to what we need to cover, 45 kilometres by 35 kilometres, you need something fairly robust and something that's very expensive. So it's actually, at this point in time, it's cheaper to use helicopters. But in time, I believe that's what will happen. The drone technology will hopefully come into that its own. From my point of view, we've been working on walkover weighing. It's conceptual, it's actually commercialised, and we're actively trying to put it into our system because we can see great benefit to us. The other key things would be GPS tracking. It's very important because we have customers with cattle. We don't own the cattle, the customer does, and it's very important that it's very transparent and they can see what's going on when you're running millions and millions of dollars worth of cattle for someone else. You've got to be transparent and they've got to have full trust and systems in place to ensure that the outcomes are going to be the right outcomes and there's a profitable outcome for them.